Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming. In this discussion, Frank Thoms will present his brand new release book, Behind the Red Veil, An American Inside Gorbachev's Russia, and share passages. At the end, he's going to answer some questions as well. There's a link down in the comment section for you to order your very own copy of his book, and I hope you do. Frank, it's all yours.
As a young teacher, I chose to take a different road from my fellow teachers. Growing up, I had ambiguous feelings about Soviets. I felt threatened by the massive Soviet Union in red on my weekly reader wall charts in my fourth grade classroom. In that same classroom, however, I was fascinated to learn that Russian inventors Thomas Edisinsky and Alexander Belsky invented the light bulb and the telephone. Later, I became enthralled about the omnipotence of Russian czars in college lectures. In 1963, my second year in the classroom, teaching eighth graders in junior high, my ambiguity dissipated. Asked by my mentor to teach Marxism and Soviet communism as legitimate ideologies, I came to understand and somewhat respect them. After all, millions of people on the planet were believers. For the rest of the 60s and in the 70s and 80s, in my classroom, I pursued my curiosity of these ideologies and the lives of Russians, each decade from a different perspective. By 1985, I could no longer see myself engaging with Soviet communism only from my classroom. It was time to go behind the Iron Curtain and meet Russians for myself. And that's what I did, many times. In the mid-80s, the threat of nuclear war loomed, but Mikhail Gorbachev had assumed leadership of the Soviet Union as General Secretary of the Communist Party. Soon, many breakthroughs between our countries materialized, attenuating tensions. There were cultural exchanges between US and Soviet citizens. The Geneva, Reykjavik, and Washington summits between President Reagan and Secretary Gorbachev further ameliorated relations between our peoples. Gorbachev's resignation as General Secretary on Christmas Day, 1991, meant the end of the Soviet Union. Behind the Red Veil, An American Inside Gorbachev's Russia will take you inside my life and my obsession with all things Russian. In my first visit to Leningrad in October 1985, I discovered two Russias. One view was led by Nina, our tour guide from Intourist, the official Soviet travel agency. She provided a safe cocoon for our group. We were placed in a foreigners-only international hotel, special restaurants, and our own tour bus, taking us to historic sites. Nina showed us a Russia in front of what I have called the Red Veil, the face of communism that the Soviet Union projected onto its citizens, foreign visitors, and to the world at large. In front of the veil, all was well. It was the Soviet Union we saw from our tour bus. The giant red flag over the Kremlin symbolized its majesty and fluttered day and night. The wind holes in the flagstaff blew constant air onto the fabric. Majestic parades in historic Red Square celebrated Soviet victories and achievements. Berioska shops laid in waiting for tourist dollars. Borscht, pilmeni, blini, and chicken Kiev were prepared in restaurants. Soviet people walked past us somberly as if we weren't there. And tourists on tours would return home speaking of a Soviet order, beauty, and hospitality. But behind this veil lurked another Russia, where I searched to find regular people in regular flats, living in regular lives, Soviet style. In my very first moments in Leningrad's International Airport, I met a mother and her two children. On my last day in Leningrad, 8 years later, in the new Russia, I said goodbye to my Russian best friend at Finland Station. In between, for nearly a year of my life, I returned most often as a teacher of English in Leningrad, Moscow, and Almaty, Kazakhstan. Each time I probed Russian life behind the red veil. I met countless Russians who opened their hearts and minds and invited me to see inside the matryoshka, Russian nesting dolls, their lives away from the purview of the red veil of Soviet officialdom. I had this intense desire. As I wrote, my experience was a piece of truth of what the Soviet Union was really like a fragment of a hologram, which depicts, by the way, an image of the whole. If I was clear about what I saw, and very careful how I told people about it, then maybe readers will be able to see the whole picture. I'll now share some passages from my book. Here are my impressions of my first moments on Russian soil. A brisk wind startles us as we step down the Aeroflot ramp and traverse the tarmac of Leningrad's Pulkovatu Airport in October 1985. A mist hovers below the night sky. Jet engines swallow the sounds of our voices as we slink toward a darkened terminal. We pass under flickering neon signs, Leningrad, Leningrad, and step through a half-opened, broken aluminum frame doorway. We are in a bleak space surrounded by unfamiliar sights and sounds. No sign of the Red Sox, no 7-Eleven, no colleagues. I've entered a cocoon spun by Intourist, the Soviet travel agency. My 18 fellow travelers and I, the only foreigners in the airport, have agreed to abide by the tour's expectations. But I'm longing to discover what I will not be invited to see. I think about the ubiquitous matryoshka, the Russian nested souvenir dolls depicting a society hidden in layers. Intourist will show me the outer layer, the polished one, reflecting the ordered, confident communism I first heard about as a child. A perky young woman, barely 5 feet tall, with brown, flailing, wild curls, 2 children close to her side, stepped in front of me. She asked me in Russian if an Englishman was on our plane. With 10 days of Russian under my belt, I answer her. After meeting her children, I hand them 2 pen pal letters from my students. And she hands me a crinkled scrap of brown paper with her name, Natasha, and a telephone number. Out of the corner of my eye, I see a security guard watching. 2 days later, unbeknownst to Nina, our tour's leader, I had lunch in Natasha's flat with her and her family. From the opening paragraphs of the book, an exploration of my childhood leading to my intense desire to probe. I grew up in a world of mechanical toys with backs and bottoms and tiny metal tabs that invited prying. Some were wind-ups that whirred and buzzed in unpredictable directions. Others stood still, playing tin drums or running strings around pulleys. Most were made in Japan. I played with them, took them apart, and reassembled them. I would peer through the narrow hardboard slits at the back of my Motorola cable radio. I applied gentle pressure to the on switch until it clicked, to see the orange glow alight in vacuum tubes, bringing in the sound. I was part of its creation. The front had a dark brown glazed plastic Venetian design. Hidden openings let out the sound. Late at night, I would spin the right-hand knob, sliding its red line dial at the top behind clear plastic. Stations having static slid by until I came to WRO 590 AM in Albany, or WTRY 980 AM in Troy, broadcasting from New York over the Taconic Ridge. No presets, nothing automatic, and no worries, except Mom, who might discover my late night listening to the Inner Sanctum or the Jack Benny Show. The radio was mine, and it sat in its special place on the shelf by my pillow. And I discovered Radio Moscow, fascinated more by where it broadcasted from than with its content, which made little sense to me. The Motorola was my private ticket to life beyond my family in the small inn where I grew up. Perhaps it was my childhood curiosity with mechanical things that provided tabs for my mind to pry beneath the obvious, particularly when it came to the secrets of Russian history and Soviet culture. Here's a piece about my first day in Leningrad, on my own, again away from the tour. Gawking under the warm afternoon sun amid the bustle of Nevsky Prospect, the Broadway of Leningrad, I spied two young men eyeing me among the crowd. My stomach tightened. I thought about the dollars in my wallet. Nina had warned us not to exchange money on the street, only to spend our dollars at the Beryoska, stores that were for privileged Soviets and foreigners. Assuming the KGB was everywhere, I didn't want to take any chances. The shorter man in dark-rimmed, trimmed beard with a receding headline approached first. His handsomer sidekick, taller, blonde, wearing large, pink-tinted, clear plastic-rimmed glasses, followed. "Hey, you from America?" asked the bearded one in good English. "I'm Alexei, and this is my friend Roman. Are you looking for Soviet